During my college years, I found myself frequently alone at my parents' house. They were often away, and we had several properties, so it wasn't unusual for me to have the house to myself. One particular summer evening, I was enjoying a show in the back sunroom, enjoying the peace and quiet. Our house was situated on a small pond, and across the water was a town park, but our immediate neighbors were few and far between. As I relaxed on the couch, I became aware of a rhythmic splashing sound coming from the pond. My initial thought was that it was ducks or geese, as they often made a racket in the water. However, the splashing continued, and it was too heavy and consistent to be caused by bird. It sounded like a human was swimming. Intrigued, I turned down the TV and listened intently. The splashing was definitely too deliberate to be wildlife. I moved closer to the window and pressed my ear to the glass. The sound of the splashing was clear, and I could hear a man humming. Someone was swimming in the section of the pond that belonged to our property. I cautiously stepped out onto the deck and peered into the darkness. The moment I opened the door, the humming and splashing stopped. Whoever it was, they knew I was there. I briefly wondered if it was one of my neighbors out for a late-night dip, but that seemed strange. None of our neighbors ever swam in the pond. Regardless, I decided against confronting whoever was out there. I retreated back inside, making sure to turn off the lights and lock the doors. I sent a text message to my brother, who was also away at college at the time, but I didn't receive an immediate response. I tried to concentrate on my show, but I couldn't shake the unsettling feeling that someone had been lurking in our backyard. I found myself constantly glancing out the window, but the night was too dark to see anything. As I sat there, it suddenly dawned on me that the light from the television was probably illuminating the backyard. Just as I reached for the remote to turn it off, I heard a noise on the deck. I quickly switched off the TV, and in the abrupt silence, I could hear the distinct sound of heavy breathing right outside the window. Terrified, I instinctively ducked down behind the couch, hoping that whoever was outside wouldn't be able to see me. For a moment, there was only silence. Then a deep voice spoke from just beyond the window. "I see you." My heart leaped into my throat. I couldn't decide whether to respond or remain silent. "Paul, is that you?" I called out, clinging to the desperate hope that it was one of our neighbors playing a prank. The voice didn't answer. I heard footsteps moving away from the window, the sound fading into the distance. I lay there on the floor behind the couch for what felt like an eternity, too frightened to even move. Eventually, I forced myself to get up and check all the doors, ensuring they were locked. I immediately texted my entire family, frantically explaining what had happened. My dad responded, telling me to turn on the backyard lights and check if anyone was still out there. He instructed me to be the man of the house and protect the property. Hesitantly, I grabbed a large knife from the kitchen and cautiously made my way to the back door. Peeking out the window, I could see that the deck was empty. Knife still in hand, I stepped outside and scanned the deck. There were wet footprints on the wooden planks, partially dried but still visible. They were bare footprints. I followed the trail of footprints around the side of the deck, and what I saw made my blood run ice cold. Peering over the edge of the deck, as if he had heard me coming and was lying in wait, was a man. I could only see the top of his head, his eyes and forehead, but the look in his eyes was enough to send me running back inside. I immediately dialed 911, then contacted my parents to tell them what had happened. My parents arrived quickly, and after a quick search of the property, they assured me that everything was fine. They asked if we had any enemies or if any of our neighbors had issues with us. I had no explanation for them. That night, I kept every window in the house tightly shut, and I ran the air conditioning, even though it wasn't particularly warm outside. I felt a little safer knowing that the house was completely sealed. When I woke up the next morning, I was overcome with relief to see the sunlight streaming through the windows. Whoever that man was, he never returned to our house. To this day, we still don't know his identity or what he wanted. The entire experience left me shaken and terrified of being home alone. I regularly take my dog for a walk 3 times a day, morning, afternoon, and night. We follow the same route each time, heading out our driveway and into the cul-de-sac parking lot that serves our condominium complex. I always take our evening walk quite late. It's a habit I've developed, and it's never been a problem. One particular night, as I was walking towards the parking lot, I thought I heard a voice. I was wearing one earbud and listening to music, so I didn't pay much attention at first. But as I got closer, a voice seemed to get louder. I paused, taking out my earbud and listening intently. Sure enough, there it was again. A voice, seemingly coming from somewhere ahead of me. I couldn't see anyone, and for a moment I wondered if I was imagining things. I cautiously continued walking. The uneasy feeling persisted. I stopped again a few feet further on, right next to where the cars were parked. Shining my flashlight around, I tried to locate the source of the voice. Then, I heard it again, and my blood ran cold. It was a muffled voice like that of a child, and it was saying help. My heart pounded in my chest and I froze, unable to move. I frantically swept my flashlight beam across the parking lot, searching for the source of the voice. It seemed to be coming from the direction of the parked cars, but I couldn't see anyone. My dog, meanwhile, seemed oblivious, sniffing at a nearby bush. Then I heard it again. Help, help, help. 3 more times, the muffled voice called out, each time from the same spot near the cars. Panic welled up inside me. I knew I wasn't imagining it. My dog's ears perked up and he was now looking in the same direction as me. That's when the true eeriness of the situation hit me. The voice didn't sound quite right. It was as if it was a child's voice, but with an adult quality to it, and each time it called for help, it was devoid of any emotion or urgency. It was just a flat, unemotional statement. My dog and I ran all the way home. I tried to explain what I had heard to my mom, but she was baffled. I suggested calling the police just in case someone really was in trouble, but she didn't think it was necessary. I couldn't shake the experience. I kept replaying it in my mind, wondering if someone had been trapped in one of the cars or if something more sinister was at play. The muffled, emotionless voice, the way it seemed to be both a child and an adult at the same time, it all filled me with a sense of dread. To this day, I still have no explanation for what I heard that night. The house had been in my family for 3 generations, a place filled with memories and history. However, a series of unsettling events led my parents to make the difficult decision to move, events that still haunt me to this day. I've struggled with depression for much of my life, a feeling of uselessness that I found difficult to shake. As a child, this darkness within me was amplified by the isolation I often felt. Our house, nestled deep within a wooded area, only intensified this feeling. Trees surrounded us on all sides, forest acting as a buffer between us and any neighbors. My room, large for a child's, was situated in the back corner, its windows offering a view directly into the woods. Even without my emotional struggles, it was an unsettling place for someone my age, especially given my fear of the dark. It started subtly when I was around 10 years old. I'd always been prone to nightmares, but at that age, seeking comfort in my parents' bed was no longer an option. My only solace was a nightlight, a simple thing with different color settings. I always kept it on red, comforting beacon in the darkness. One night, however, I woke up abruptly, something I rarely did. Glancing at the nightlight, I noticed it was a different color. Disregarding it as a trick of my tired mind, I fell back asleep. A week later, it happened again. This time, I questioned my parents, but they dismissed my concerns, attributing it to a glitch in the nightlight. I wanted to believe them, but a seed of doubt had been planted. That seed grew into full-blown fear when I woke up one morning to find the nightlight unplugged, lying on the floor. My parents, once again, brushed off my concerns, insisting I was too old for such things anyway. Their words felt dismissive, like they weren't taking me seriously. A few days later, the nightlight vanished completely. I knew then that my parents were lying, trying to convince me I'd imagined the whole thing. A fight erupted, accusations flying back and forth, but neither of us budged from our positions. Trust between us felt irrevocably broken. For a week, things returned to a semblance of normalcy, but it was a fragile peace. 3 nights in a row, I woke up in the middle of the night, a sense of unease clinging to me. When I confided in my parents, they attributed it to puberty. to the natural changes my body was undergoing. Their words, meant to reassure, only fueled my anxiety. The next time it happened, I decided to stay awake. Minutes ticked by, and then I heard it. Faint rustling coming from my closet. My parents, of course, didn't believe me. My dad even went so far as to check the closet himself, throwing open the door and rummaging through the old toys and posters stored within. He found nothing, but the rustling continued. For 4 agonizing nights, I endured the torment, fear gnawing at my sanity. Finally, I broke down, begging my parents to believe me. My dad, at his wit's end, dragged me to the closet, determined to prove once and for all that there was nothing there. He ripped posters off the wall, tossing toys aside, his anger palpable. Suddenly he froze, his eyes fixed on the wall where a poster had been moments before. There, hidden from view, was a gaping hole. My mother screamed. My father grabbed a flashlight. The hole was too deep to see where it led. Racing outside, my father frantically searched for the source. At the base of the house, almost invisible beneath a thin layer of dirt, was another hole. It wasn't a natural formation. It was a passageway, leading from the darkness of the woods directly into my room. We left that night, my mother and I seeking refuge at my aunt's house. We never went back. The thought of what might have happened, of the unseen presence lurking in my room, still sends chills down my spine. To this day, my parents refuse to speak of that time. The guilt and fear etched on their faces whenever the subject arises. Perhaps they feel responsible, their dismissal of my fears allowing the nightmare to continue for as long as it did. Looking back, I'm filled with a chilling certainty. Someone was in my room, night after night, their motives shrouded in darkness. What they wanted, why they were there, remains a terrifying mystery. But one thing is clear: when a child tells you something is wrong, believe them. Don't wait for proof, for the moment when fear gives way to something far more sinister.